Welcome once again. Hope you people are doing well. Okay, so let's continue in the Playwright BDD series over here, where we are using the BDD core feature, but utilizing all the features of the Playwright that it has given inside the Playwright. Okay, so in our previous session, we talked about how do we do a data-driven testing using a JSON file. So we have written a feature file in like the test case inside the feature file by just writing it by using a scenario over here. But all the data-driven testing part, we have written it inside one method over here and then method over here, whatever the validation we had to do by all like calling all those data from the JSON file, right? So sometimes what happen is people also try to also write in by utilizing like scenario outline and then taking the data from the examples, right? What however we have seen in the form of inside the login dot feature, right? But here we'll write in the same way by utilizing the scenario outline part of the things over here, and then we'll also try to get the data from the JSON file. Okay, so let's see how do we write it, which we'll take the example over here, scenario outline, and we'll say it as, let's say, write some kind of name, which is like failed login with some invalid credentials that I'm just trying to write it over here. Credentials. So we have failed login with invalid credential over here. Login failed login with invalid username and password. I'll try to write it out. Okay, so username and password, something that I've given just a unique name in this case. Now everything remains same. Whatever we have written it over here will remain same in this case as well. Okay, so all those value that we are trying to put it will remain same in this case as well. The only thing that happens over here is the data that we are trying to get it, the data that we are trying to get it inside the examples table, right? So that will get it in the form of index. So one, I'll try to write it over here an index, and that value will get it one by one. So 0, 1, and 3 different data we have. So we'll get it like value in the form of index over here. Okay, that means inside an array, we can also access the value using index, right? From the array, we can also access the value by using their index as well. So that is what we'll try to do over here in this case. The same thing that we'll try to do over here. There will not be any difference in this case, right? So when you try to get the data in the form of index, what changes will be there is there'll be a very slight changes in terms of our the current like all or the previous part that we have done it over here, right, inside this. So what did we do is we have gotten the data from the JSON file, right? We'll use the same step definition this time as well, but there will be a slight difference that we have to do in this case. What is the difference over here? That earlier we have written only the scenario, this time we have written scenario outline as well, and from the scenario outline we'll get the index one by one. So whenever you try to iterate through, we'll get the index one by one, and from there we'll take the data by utilizing the index. So instead of getting the data one by one from the array over here, we'll get the data in by using the index position of the array. This value, this import will remain same, which we are trying to import from the JSON, and that JSON value will get imported in the form of array, right? And whenever you have to get the data from an array, we simply say it as array of 0 inside the square bracket. You can mention how do we what I mean to say over here is, let's say if you want to get the first value or first data from the array, you can simply say it as invalid, let's say, data, and then 0, right? So in this case what happen is, let's try to do npx bdd gen over here, npx bdd gen, and you'll see the data what it is generating over here. So in this case you'll see that it has returned the first data. What is the first data? If you go inside the JSON file, this is the first data available, right? So that data will generate will get it one by one using their index in this case. Okay, so when you get the index value, when you basically get the index value, we can again iterate through over here by using first time what we have written is examples, right? So for the first time execution, it will get the 0th index. For second time execution, it will get first index, and for third time execution, it will get second index over here, right? Array index starts with 0. Okay, so let's see how do we do that in this scenario when we have written the similar test cases by following the scenario outline and examples over here. Fine. Let's go ahead and see how do we do the data-driven testing in this case. Now here what we have given is index, right? So that index we have to basically get it inside our file over here, like inside our step over here. That means inside the step definition file, whenever you have to get the data, we'll be getting the data in the form of index value, right? So that index we have to inject it so that it will, whatever the value that we have used over here will be taken inside the test execution, and that index value, it will get it over there. Okay, so let's see how do we do that and what are the changes that we have to make it. We already have a step definition which we have written in the same way when I enter valid username and some data over here, and then what happened is what we are trying to check it, right? So but here we have to make some kind of change. So here we can say that when I enter a valid username and password and click on login button, let's say for certain for index. What is this that we have written over here is what we are trying to write it over here is this index that you see will at the time of execution, this index will refer the header that you have given it over here. Refer the header that you have given it over here. And here as well, we can say like for this particular index, for whatever the data that we are trying to do for this particular index, we are trying to get the data, right? That means we are every time getting the index value from this example table. Okay, so this time we have to change something over here. We have changed the step definition like when and then keywords over here, or the step over here, just slight change that we have added for, and then we have used an index which will take the data from the examples table over here, right? So we have to also change accordingly in this case. I'll just copy paste the same thing that I'm trying to use it over here. So I'll just copy paste and make it a slide better. Or what we can do is we'll just use the similar things which is like did in the previous session where we have used npx BDD gen for whatever the step that was not generated the step definition in our file, it has generated over here, right? So we can simply copy paste this inside the step definition file. So let's copy paste these value over here. Okay, so this is taking an argument. What is this argument? The index that we have given it inside the feature file. Okay, so that argument it is also trying to generate it over here. So I'll make it as index in this case. Okay, and all the other values remain same. All the other values remain same, whatever we have given it inside this particular file, inside this particular step over here. So for now, I'm just copy pasting this inside this because we know that we are trying to do a duplication of the part over here. The same test case we are trying to write multiple times in the similar form, like in different format, but similar test case we are trying to write in a different format. This kind of things will not happen in terms of the real time, but I just want to show you there are different ways in which you can automate. That is where I'm trying to take it over here. Okay, so earlier we have created one results over here. This time I'll just say it as, let's say this is a test data, simple a test data that we are, let's say that I'm also trying to generate it over here. Generate it means I'm just trying to declare a test data array this time. This time our array we have given the name as test data, and that we are trying to get the data over here. But what is this test data this time? So this time our test data should be the data that with this test data will be getting the data, will basically be getting the data from this invalid data over here, right? So from this invalid data, what is this invalid data? Invalid data is something that we have, um, so invalid data is something that we have gotten it over here, right? This invalid data will get the value one by one, right? Invalid data is getting the value from the JSON file over here. Okay, so that will get one by one the value, and this invalid data anyways will get the data over there. So we do not have to do any kind of looping in this case, because we have already written the index part over here, which is index 0, index 1, index 2, right? We do not have to do any kind of looping over here in this case. I'll just remove this, and we uh, okay, so this is not the actual one that we are trying to do, so we do not want this as well. I'll just do it over here, and this invalid data, whatever the invalid data that we have imported over here, invalid data that we have imported over here will get the data in the form of array, right? We have seen it earlier as well. So that by using their index, when you say like index of 0, this will get the value. What it will return us, it has returned us earlier. So if you just mention it npx BDD gen, you will see that when it generates the data over here, right, it has given some kind of error because we have not removed this part over here. In this case, we have removed the for loop, but did not remove their closing part as well. So let's generate it, and here we have given invalid of 0, right? If you see here, we have given invalid data of 0. What is this 0? 0 is the first index that it will get from the complete data. What is complete data? Complete data, you can also print it over here. The complete data is this, and then first value of the array over here is this one. So total value that it generates is this one. So inside the square bracket, all the values are over here, and then the first data is this available over here, right? So when you use an index, it will get one by one the value from the array that it have stored inside the invalid data. Okay, now let's go to this when part, and this will get the value so that we can store it inside variable. Let's say I'll say it as const data. Okay, so this data will get the value the first time, whatever the value that we have gotten over there, right, inside the invalid of 0. So when the iteration starts over here, when the loop starts over here, right, first time it will get the data, like invalid data will have an array. That array will get stored over here inside the invalid array, and that index we are trying to use. So first time it will get 0 index. That 0 index we are trying to put it inside this. Whatever the value will be there inside the 0 index, we'll get it over here, and then it prints the value, which is data dot username, data dot password, and so on. Whatever the value that it basically requires. Okay, and now we do not have to put this as well. We do not have to put all these things as well over here inside this, because we were putting it inside when we were trying to write the complete logic inside the when file itself, right, inside the when method. When we were trying to write all the logics to iterate through each and every data, there we were trying to collect the data and compare it inside the then, right? Here what we are doing is we are iterating through index of the array by using the scenario outline and examples, right? So here we do not require all these things to be loaded over there. Yeah, we can simply write this, and this part of the value we can take it inside the then folder. Okay, we can take it inside this then. Okay, so this becomes a simple. This time we are iterating through again by using however we have done earlier inside this scenario outline in the same way, but the only thing is that we are trying to get the data from JSON file over here. Fine. Now this again here we also have to get the invalid index over here, like from the data from the invalid data over here by using their index. So this data will get again, we are still in the first process. When it start the execution of this particular test or like scenario outline, first time it will get 0th index. So that 0 index will go to both when and then. So that we are trying to catch it over here, right? So that index we are again getting it over here, and the data will be stored inside this data, right? And in this case, what we can say is we do not have to again do much more things over here. Instead of getting the text value and so on, what we can simply say it as a wait login page dot error message that we have, which is error message, which is a locator over here, right? So we can directly write assertion over here in this case, which will say it as expect login page dot error message dot to have text. To have text is a method which will compare the text value exactly in the same way however we have given inside the JSON file, right? So that JSON file will get it over here and then get the data from the JSON file. Simple and sober. It's pretty simple to write the assertion over here, right? If you also want to write the console.log as well, however we have written it over here inside this den file, so that you can also write. If you want to write it over here, you can also write it in this case as well. So this will get the data over here, and then we can remove it. So again, this is not a result. This is basically a data. So this data dot username will be printed over here. Okay, in this case, it is pretty simple. What we have done is we have used scenario outline, and inside the examples, we have given the index. What is index? The first time it will get the first JSON, second time it will get the second JSON, third time it will get the third JSON, and so on. Okay, so that is what when and then we have written it over here, which is by using their index value. Okay, so whenever the test execution start, it will go to a feature file wherever we have written the feature file. From there, it first navigate to this URL, and then it will be taken to this over here, which is like index value and so on. And also, let's say if you do not want to write every time the login over here, and that means URL every time, then this URL also you can put it inside the base URL over here. Okay, again that we'll see later. Now let's go ahead and execute this. So we have written a feature file inside that scenario outline, every scenario outline in detail along with the examples. We have also created a step definition which is required for us. Login page we have already created earlier, the page classes over here. So that is also getting iterated over here. Now let's try to execute this and see whether it is working in the same way or not. So npx BDD gen will generate everything again from fresh, and then let's say I'll give this one as a tag name as um, let's say JSON @JSON, or you can simply say it as let's say only, and I'll just try to run this particular part, right? So in this case, npx again run it as BDD gen over here, npx BDD gen, which will be generated with a tag @only, and then you can write it as npx playwright test, and then filter out the test case by using grep minus grep, and then provide the tag name that you are trying to use, which is only in this case over here, right? Let's see whether it is able to execute this or not. So here, see, it is now saying running 3 test case using one worker. Why? Because it is basically trying to get the value one by one from the examples table, and whatever the data that it is basically trying to enter it over here is getting it from the JSON file. Okay, now over here you can see, so we have given this file over here. You can see again how does it generate the data in terms of the test result. So test result is again for the same. So example 1, example 2, example 3, the data from the first file. So first time it has gotten the data, invalid username, right? For second test case, it is probably invalid password, and for third one, it is basically invalid username again, right? So this time, if you see, this looks pretty much better than the previous one, Like this have generated the report with the different examples that it has taken over here. That means the data it has gotten from the examples table, but that example table data was getting it or fetched it from the JSON file over here. Okay, so in the next session, we'll talk about how do we get the data from the Excel file. We'll be writing or we'll be utilizing in the same way. However, we have written it over here, the feature file. We'll just change certain things and then we'll see like how do we get it from the Excel file over here. Okay.